Underground, firefighters are attacking the flames, trying to keep them from reaching the treetops. Despite the long and exhausting wildfire season in British Columbia, the crews are persevering.
You're pushing the limits of what humans can do in this job a lot of the time, whether physically, emotionally, or intellectually, just the amount you have to manage at any given moment.
BC has had record-breaking wildfire seasons before, but this one is the most destructive. More than 2 million hectares have burned so far. On the front lines is the BC Wildfire Service.
We don't have any more eyes on the far side, so if you guys want to walk with me and we can just go take a quick look.
We were granted rare access to experience what crews are up against. We joined them at the end of July as they wrestled the Rossmore Lake wildfire just south of Kamloops.
It looks like the wind's just going to stay favorable. I spoke to Helco.
Aus Al-Mubarak is a task force leader.
I'm trying to do a surface burn. What I want to do is I want to remove all the surface fuels because that's how fire starts to spread. If I take that out of the equation, I can walk away from here being very confident that my fire will not wrap around me.
It's a tactic that uses fire to fight fire. In this case, they're using small hand torches to burn natural fuels on the ground like dried grasses. Over the course of the next few days, they'll do a number of planned ignitions, all of it carefully considered and executed.
So I need to make sure that this is already black because what is black doesn't burn again.
This wildfire season is the most serious firefight Canada has ever faced. Over 18 million hectares engulfed nationwide, and that figure is growing every day. More than 230,000 people had to be evacuated from their homes, and the military has been deployed.
This has been unprecedented, but unfortunately, it's what fire scientists and climatologists have predicted is going to happen.
Robert Gray is a wildland fire ecologist who's been working in the field for more than 4 decades. He says acceleration of climate change is amplifying the length and severity of fire seasons.
We know that as the global mean temperature rises, we're going to see longer fire seasons, hotter fires, bigger fires, more severe fires. There was hope that this wouldn't happen for another decade or so, but it's happening now, which means that we'll likely see worse than this in the future.
Human negligence, excess forest debris, and hot and dry weather can all be contributing factors. Lightning strikes cause nearly half of all wildland fires in Canada, according to the federal government. And in BC, it's about 60%.
Climate change is resulting in more lightning. So for every 1 degree C increase in global mean temperature, research shows there's about a 12% increase in lightning.
Lightning is a major cause of fires in British Columbia. We get lightning storms all throughout the summer. We're able to track those storms using weather radars, so we can see the fires as a result of that. 3 up McConnell for 2 pickups.
Adam Buchanan, a member of the BC Wildfire Service and a former fire investigator, took us to a barren landscape littered with charred trees, dried soil, and seared holes. Even though you can't see it on the surface, he explained how fires can burn underground.
To me, this looks like an animal burrow. It's not that. What are these holes?
When the fire moved through here, it consumed the stump and also burnt all the roots. And so the fire will not just consume everything on top like we can see, but it also moves its way and finds whatever vegetation is available to burn underneath. And so when we're putting this out, it takes a lot longer because we can't just spray water on the top. We have to come and check these, and this could still be burning 10, 12, 15 feet down any one of these routes that we're looking at.
Wow. So we were deemed safe to come to this area. How did we know that there wouldn't be a hot spot?
The only way to know for sure is to get in there with our hands, feel it, see if it's hot, and if it is, then spend some time to make sure we put it out.
How's the truck looking? We're good on water?
Firefighters here at Rossmore will use the same process to determine if the wildfire is out. But they have a long way to go before getting to that point. Crews are into their 2nd week of fighting, and there is no end in sight.
What's your message to the general public here now going into August?
Bear with us. we're trying our best. There's usually stages in the season where there's more fires than the limited number of people we have can handle. And especially this year, the whole country got strapped at the same time. And so resources we'd have had traditionally, we just weren't there.
It's a criticism we hear again and again. There is simply not enough people power to put out all the wildfires. More than 4,300 international firefighters have been called in to help.
So I think that's going to be the game plan.
At just this site, there are units from Mexico and the U.S.
For the first time, I've seen the U.S. be able to come help us when we couldn't help them, so it's good to see them here.
I was talking to one guy today, and he was saying he's already done 60 days. My main focus of being here is just, how can we help?
Para mí, el estar el día de hoy aquí, pues es muy importante. Primero que nada, porque puedo aportar algo de mí y de mi país en el país de Canadá.
We are honored to be here. It's amazing. As far as we know, some of the first engines and strike teams that can just drive through the border and come assist on this, and hopefully this is an agreement that stays.
The agreements of having other firefighters come in and help Canadians is not new. We've been doing it for years. Similar Canadians have gone to other countries to help. What is different is the use and the reliance on the municipal firefighters this year has surpassed anything we've ever seen before in the past.
Chief Ken McMullen is the president of the Canadian Association of Fire Chiefs. He says the wildfires are so large this year, significantly more local fire departments have sprung into action, either to fight the flames approaching populated areas or help with evacuations. Many municipal firefighters are volunteers, and the length of this season is taking its toll.
The volunteer fire system has been around for centuries, and it works most of the time. What it's not designed to do is for these long, drawn-out events that we're now into 3 months going on to it, that we have to make sure that we're doing everything that we can to ensure they're protected.
This summer, the federal government announced funding to train 1,000 new wildland firefighters over 5 years. That won't solve the problem, and some experts say it's time to reevaluate how fires are managed. Wildland firefighting is mostly a provincial or territorial responsibility. Technically, there is a national organization that coordinates resources, but its scope is limited, and there are calls for the Canadian government to create a new national body, similar to the Federal Emergency Management Agency, or FEMA, in the U.S.
We believe that there's some great parallels Canada could look at and duplicate off of that. So we've asked the federal government to consider implementing a national fire advisor, a position that would be embedded in the government to help coordinate all disciplines and all ministries of government when it comes to significant events similar to what we've seen this summer. There's going to be values to both the wildland firefighter system as well as the municipal firefighting system.
If we just get more firefighters, we're just putting more firefighters' lives at risk. What we've been suggesting and advising the government is we need to build capacity for sure, but that capacity has to be this holistic approach around fire and fuels.
So far, there is no commitment to create a new federal agency. Even if there was, it wouldn't happen overnight. In the meantime, those on the Fireline are working tirelessly with new fires erupting all the time. The goal now is to find solutions to minimize the destruction and save lives.
It's been a long summer, and there's moments where I'm tired and I just want it to be winter again, but I know there's still a lot of summer left. And we'll just keep putting our head down until we can take a breath of fresh air.
I just want to do a quick touch base. We've had a lot of movement, a lot of transition the last couple days.
It's the start of another busy day for the crew on the Rossmore Lake wildfire.
I know some people are new to the fire, but if you've been on the fire, you know that this area that we're in, we get a lot of variable winds. Things change really quick, so just be aware of that.
Can I ask what the logbook's all about?
We have all of our notes as proof of things that we did. Escape routes, where we're located, what we're doing for the day.
See you out there on the line.
For days, we've been on the control line with firefighters who are trying to make headway against the flames.
Que bueno.
Jimmy! Wildfire officer Jimmy Haig is one of them.
I needed that.
I'm glad it's the morning.
He's been fighting fires for 27 years.
I've been a member of the Métis Nation of Ontario since I was 16 years old. I gained my foundation from Indigenous firefighters who took me out on the line, and they taught me the skills essential to mop up fires. Sí, en contrafuego.
Jimmy is also a provincial field liaison officer for the Mexican contingent, who have done multiple deployments this summer.
It's quite impressive to see them go to work with those machetes on the Fireline. It's been explained to me that they learn from generation to generation the skills how to use a machete effectively in the forest.
They are using machetes to remove branches. Here, teams are conducting planned ignitions, which is a key fire suppression tool.
It's an emergency measure, so yeah, it's planned because you're going to apply it where you want to apply it. Your objectives in that case, you just want to nuke the fuel.
With climate change, fire seasons will continue to accelerate. That's why fire ecologists like Robert Gray say we need to reimagine how we think about fire. Instead of fearing it, we need to embrace it.
We need to be doing much more prescribed burning. Strategically doing it around communities is a really important place to be doing it. People, they hear us say that and they what do you mean you're burning next to communities?
Prescribed burns are similar to planned ignitions, except the goals are different. When managed properly, prescribed fire can be a powerful tool. It can reduce fuel sources, create healthy forests, and boost animal habitat.
The other thing fire does is it releases all the nutrients that are stored in the dead material.
To explain the benefits, Robert walked us through an area where a prescribed burn was performed this spring at the airport in Cranbrook, BC.
So if you had a little bit of wind and you dropped a match here right now, it would carry a fire. Even though we burnt this in April, it would be really easy to put out and it wouldn't hurt anything because it's just such low flame length. So in this ecosystem where grass dominates, that treatment buys you 6 months where it might stop a fire. But that's this ecosystem. Some ecosystems where it's not grass dominated, you do that prescribed burn and it might buy you a couple decades.
This approach to fire mitigation, experts say, should be significantly expanded, especially since these burns can act like fences to fire movement.
If you have a lot of fences on the landscape, and even if you're just slowing down fires, it buys time for the weather to change. It buys time for suppression resources to get there. And eventually you'll start to see fire size shrink. And that's basically emulating that historic landscape, because the historic landscape was full of these fences. And most of them were created by Indigenous people using cultural fire.
This is one area out here that we'll be hoping to burn this year.
On the outskirts of Rocky Mountain House, Alberta, Amy Cardinal Christensen takes stock of her land. The research scientist with the Canadian Forest Service is evaluating areas to carry out cultural burnings.
So my family's nation was co-signers on Treaty 6, and right here we're located in Treaty 6 territory. And so for me, it's been a really cool experience to be able to bring fire back to this landscape. We try to burn every spring or fall, just depending on the conditions.
Cultural burning is an Indigenous practice using controlled fire. It holds different meanings for different communities.
For cultural fire, it's much more of an activity that's based on a long-term relationship with the land. And one of the things is trying to put on the ground these fires that we can walk beside, fires that are lower risk, that we can kind of control when and where they move, and that we achieve certain cultural objectives from.
Amy took us to a spot on her property where she did a cultural fire this spring.
We want to maintain this as being like an open grassy meadow area to promote like the different types of plants here. We've got some amazing raspberries, some beautiful currant bushes, and a lot of deer that come to this area, so we want to keep it open.
There are multiple advantages to the practice, one of which is land stewardship, which can also protect people. Indigenous communities are often the hardest hit by wildfires.
Indigenous communities have been impacted by 42% of wildfire evacuation events. So it's a huge disproportional impact on our communities compared to other Canadians.
Last of the evacuees.
Amy's research found that between 1980 and 2021, some Indigenous communities were forced to evacuate several times.
some up to 7 times during that period. And with this summer, we're seeing even more communities that have been evacuated multiple times, even just in a single season. The idea with cultural fire, right, is that you want to preserve these types of trees.
She says allowing communities to restore their cultural burning practices is a simple solution to reduce risk. But because of historical and colonial policies and laws, there are barriers on who can do burnings on which lands.
There still exists quite a paternalistic relationship right now in terms of fire management. Often nations that I work with, they want to do their own fire stewardship on their territories, but they're honestly not allowed.
There's still a lot of hurdles, a lot of barriers to it, but it's going to be so important going forward for Indigenous communities to be able to burn the way they historically did and for the reasons that they did.
The hope now is that governments will listen. One challenge is the time required to get a prescribed or cultural burn approved. Between planning and official sign-offs, it can take years. And even when it happens, it's not large enough.
In BC, we should be burning on the order of 200,000 hectares a year to get caught up on things. We're way behind. And other provinces, very, very small burn programs. The US does about 150,000 prescribed burns a year across multiple agencies, about 10 million acres a year burned. And they're still in the deficit. They need to be doing more. So that's the scale that we need to be at.
Robert says Canada should look to the US as a guide.
One of the things that's really worked in the US are prescribed burn associations or prescribed fire councils. And then there's a national coalition of prescribed fire councils. And some of them are grassroots led, some are agency led, and that's a great way to do it.
We don't need just one person burning like 1 million hectares, we need 1 million people burning 1 hectare, and it makes the problem become much more attainable.
So build local capacity here to do the fuels work. And then when fire season comes, you've got more resources and you can put them on fires. And then when fire season's done, they go back to doing the fuels work.
And I think a very natural partner for that is Indigenous nations, right, who already have that expertise and knowledge in their territories.
Back near Kamloops, Jimmy and the Mexican contingent are making their way to the eastern side of the Rossmore Lake wildfire. Even at a distance from the raging flames, danger is all around.
And immediately they recognize this tree across the line.
Squad boss Simone Bermudez cuts it down.
Trees falling have always been a concern.
That's right.
How much of that in this area right now is that on your mind?
It's no different this year than years before. One of the first conversations we always have is where are we going? Who's going to be there to help us if we need to? How do we get out and what are the hazards? Life and safety are always number one, otherwise, what's the point?
4 firefighters have died on duty this fire season. The first was killed by a falling tree. Others have been injured.
In light of what we heard over the weekend was the 4th firefighter to die on the front line, how are you doing?
It kind of brings to the forefront the reality of what's going on. There is inherent risk, always. We understand that. And when something like this happens, like the deaths, unfortunately, that occurred this year, it's a reminder of where our priorities should lie, not to get tunnel vision on getting something done. But everybody feels it, you know, a red shirt's a red shirt.
Some crews will continue to work until the snow falls, but improving conditions on the ground for the future is going to be a long haul. It goes beyond just trying to put out all the fires. It's going to take multiple solutions, and everyone is going to have to be involved.
Even if we can't, solve this 100%, doing nothing means that we lost the game. I'm still hopeful that if we do things at the right scale, that we can have a very positive outcome and very positive benefit for future generations. We have to. I have to believe that.